Big thanks to Quincy and the research team for all their work on this one. Welcome back to Canada News Summaries. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jane.
And we've got some pretty interesting Canadian political news to dig into today. You like what you hear, make sure to follow and like and share this with your friends.
All right, sounds good.
So Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is back in Ottawa, and he's facing some, let's just say, pushback. Even from within his own party, we're seeing these growing calls for him to step down. And it's not just coming from the opposition, you know.
Yeah, this is going beyond the usual political back and forth.
Yeah.
When you have Liberal caucus members openly questioning Trudeau's leadership, well, that definitely adds a whole new layer to things.
So what's behind this discontent within the Liberal Party? Is it tied to any specific policies or events, or is it more of a general feeling of unease?
You know, it's probably a mix of things. The Liberals have been in power for a while now, right? So some members might just feel like it's time for a change. Plus, there's the whole weight of those controversies that have come up during Trudeau's time in office. Things like the SNC-Lavalin affair and the blackface scandal. You know, those incidents can definitely chip away at trust and confidence, both within the party and among the public.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And it seems like this discontent has really come to a head, with Liberal caucus chairs actually meeting to talk about the situation.
Yeah, and there's even talk of them pushing for a full caucus meeting. Can you imagine the pressure on Trudeau if his own party formally asks him to resign or demands a timeline for his departure? I mean, some Liberals are already looking at their leadership roles, maybe even getting ready for a leadership race.
Wow, that's a pretty strong sign that they're seriously thinking about a change at the top. All this internal pressure has got to be weighing on Trudeau, especially as he makes his first public appearance of the year.
Right. He visited the U.S. Embassy to sign the condolence book for former President Jimmy Carter. Now, he didn't talk to the media, but his message in the condolence book, praising Carter's leadership and his humanitarian work, really stood out. He wrote, "As a leader, president, and humanitarian, Jimmy Carter left the world a better place, a fundamentally decent man. He showed what it means to live a life of purpose to serve. I will always be grateful for his thoughtful advice and will continue to draw inspiration from his extraordinary life. From your 41 million Canadian neighbors, merci, Jimmy."
Sounds like he's being very careful with his words. Maybe trying to project an image of stability amidst all this chaos?
Maybe. And there's something else interesting about this appearance. He had facial hair, kind of like he did during the COVID-19 pandemic. Some people are speculating that it might be a subtle sign of the stress he's under, or maybe even a way to bring back that image of strength and leadership that he had back then.
That's a really interesting observation. Makes you wonder if he's intentionally using his appearance to send a message. But regardless of what he's trying to do, there's no denying that the pressure is on. It'll be fascinating to see how he handles these challenges, both from within his own party and from the outside world.
Absolutely. And speaking of the outside world, we can't ignore the big development on the international scene. Donald Trump is back in the spotlight.
It's like 2016 all over again. All that uncertainty coming back.
Yeah.
How's this impacting Canada?
Yeah.
Especially considering their close relationship with the U.S.
Well, Trudeau was also at a meeting of the Canada-U.S. Cabinet Committee, which is focused on managing relations with the incoming Trump administration. And this comes right after a meeting between Canadian ministers and Trump at Mar-a-Lago just last week.
So they're already engaging with Trump and his team.
Yeah.
What's the general feeling in Canada about all this? Is there a sense of apprehension about Trump's return?
Definitely some concerns, especially when you think about some of Trump's past comments and actions towards Canada, like imposing tariffs on Canadian goods and making remarks about Canada being better off as part of the U.S., what some people call the 51st state rhetoric.
Ah, yes, the 51st state rhetoric. That's got to ruffle some feathers in Canada.
It does. That kind of talk, which is rooted in this history of U.S. expansionist ideas, is seen by a lot of Canadians as disrespectful of their sovereignty and their national identity.
I can understand that. So how's Canada approaching this new chapter in their relationship with the U.S. now that Trump's back? Are they playing it safe, or are they trying to assert their independence more forcefully?
Well, Green Party leader Elizabeth May, she really emphasized the need for strong Canadian leadership in the face of this 51st state talk. She acknowledged that Trudeau's in a tough spot, but she stressed that Canada's strength goes beyond any single leader.
That's an interesting point. It suggests that no matter who's in charge, Canada will hold on to its own identity and stand up for its interests.
Exactly. And May's perspective is especially interesting because the Green Party hasn't historically had a ton of power in Canadian politics. Could this situation with Trudeau's leadership being questioned and Trump back on the scene, could this create an opportunity for other voices and other parties to step up and shape Canada's future?
It's definitely a possibility. This whole mix of events could really reshape the political landscape, creating a chance for new leaders and new approaches to come forward. But before we go too deep into those possibilities, I want to go back to something else for a second.
Okay, what's on your mind?
I keep thinking about Trudeau's visit to the U.S. Embassy and that detail about his facial hair. Do you think it's a deliberate choice? Like a way of projecting a certain image? Or is it just a coincidence?
It's hard to say for sure. Maybe he's trying to project strength and stability, especially given everything that's going on. Or maybe, like you said before, it's a way of tapping into that nostalgia from his leadership during the pandemic when he also had a beard. Remember how popular he was back then? It could be a subconscious way of trying to bring back those feelings of trust and confidence.
Yeah. It's a curious detail that adds another layer to this whole story. It's like he's sending a subtle message. But what that message is, well, that's up for debate.
It really is. And that's what makes it so fascinating. You've got a leader facing pressure from his own party. You've got a controversial figure like Trump back in the game. And you've got the potential for a major shift in Canadian politics. It's a recipe for intrigue and uncertainty.
It's like we're watching a political thriller unfold in real life. And just like in a good thriller, we're left wondering what's going to happen next. Will Trudeau make it through this political storm? Will other leaders step up to challenge him? How will Canada deal with the U.S. now that Trump's back in the mix?
These are all questions we'll be exploring more in this episode. But first, we need to take a closer look at what all this could mean. Stay with us as we unpack the complexities of this evolving political landscape.
And don't forget, if you're liking our analysis, hit that follow button, like this episode, and share it with your friends so they can join the conversation too. We'll be back after this short break.
So before the break, we were talking about some pretty major events. Trudeau's leadership challenges, Trump's return, and the potential for a shift in Canadian politics. There's a lot to unpack there.
There really is. I think it's worth focusing on the pressure that's building against Trudeau for a minute. I mean, seeing those calls for his resignation coming from inside his own party, that's not an everyday occurrence.
Right. It feels like this discontent has been simmering for a while, and maybe the holidays were kind of the final straw.
Maybe. It's important to remember, though, that parties in power often go through these cycles of support and dissent, I guess.
Yeah.
After a certain amount of time, some members might just feel like it's time for a change, regardless of how the leader's doing.
True. So are we seeing a natural political cycle play out here, or is this something more specific to Trudeau and his leadership?
It's probably a combination of both. The Liberal Party's been in power for a while now, so it's normal to see some internal shifts. But then you've got the controversies that Trudeau's been involved in, too. Those can't be ignored.
Right? Things like the SNC-Lavalin affair and the blackface scandal. Those events can really damage trust, both within the party and among the public.
And if that trust keeps eroding, it could create a leadership vacuum within the Liberal Party.
Exactly. And that vacuum could be filled by any number of ambitious politicians just waiting for their chance to take the reins.
So who are these potential successors waiting in the wings? Are there any clear frontrunners if a leadership race actually happens?
It's too early to say for sure, but I'm sure there are plenty of people in the Liberal Party who are sizing up their chances and strategizing behind the scenes. This could be a make-or-break moment for the party's future.
Okay, so let's shift gears for a minute and talk about the elephant in the room. Or maybe we should say the elephant south of the border, Donald Trump.
Oh yeah, Trump's return to the political stage is definitely sending shockwaves around the world. And Canada's right in the path of those shockwaves.
Those meetings between Canadian ministers and Trump at Mar-a-Lago last week were pretty interesting. What's your take on them? Is Canada playing it safe? Or are they ready to push back against Trump's agenda?
It seems like they're trying to walk a fine line. They're acknowledging that the relationship is important, but they're also getting ready to stand up for Canadian values and interests if they have to.
That must be a tricky balancing act. On the one hand, they have this close economic and political relationship with the U.S., but on the other hand, you have Trump's policies and his rhetoric, which often clash with Canadian values on things like climate change and social justice.
Exactly. You can already see the potential for conflict there.
Why?
Remember what happened during Trump's last presidency? He imposed tariffs on Canadian goods, he pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement, and he made some pretty controversial statements about Canada.
So it sounds like they're trying to maintain a strong relationship while also asserting their independence. It's a tightrope walk for sure.
And don't forget, Trudeau's dealing with all that internal pressure we talked about earlier. A leader who's already weakened might find it even harder to stand up to someone like Trump.
That's a great point. This situation could give other Canadian leaders a chance to step up and play a bigger role in shaping Canada's foreign policy, especially if they feel like Trudeau isn't doing a good job of representing their interests.
Right. And that makes Elizabeth May's statement about Canada's strength going beyond any single leader even more important.
Yeah, it sounds like she's trying to reassure Canadians, telling them that their country is strong enough to handle these challenges, no matter who's in charge.
It's a powerful message, and it suggests that the political landscape in Canada might be more fluid than it seems. We might see other parties and leaders gaining more influence in the months and years ahead.
Okay, so let's go back to Trudeau's appearance at the U.S. Embassy to sign the condolence book for Jimmy Carter for a minute. It was a short appearance, but it felt significant given the current situation.
Absolutely. It was his first public appearance of the year, and it happened at a time when his leadership is under a microscope. Every move he makes is being analyzed and interpreted.
Which brings us back to that detail about his facial hair. Do you think there's more to it than meets the eye? Is he consciously trying to project a certain image? Or is it just a coincidence?
It's definitely possible. We know that image is everything in politics.
Yeah.
And Trudeau is really good at managing his image. The beard could be a way for him to project strength and resilience in the face of all these challenges. Or maybe, like you said earlier, it's a way of tapping into those positive feelings from the pandemic era when he also had a beard.
Interesting. Either way, it's a fascinating detail that adds another layer of intrigue to this already complex situation. It's like he's sending a message. But what that message is, well, that's open to interpretation.
It really is. And that's what makes all of this so captivating. You've got a leader who's facing internal challenges. You've got a controversial figure like Trump back on the scene. And you've got the potential for a major shift in the Canadian political landscape. It's a recipe for drama and uncertainty.
It's like we're watching a political thriller play out in real time. And just like a good thriller, we're on the edge of our seats wondering what's going to happen next. Will Trudeau survive this political storm? Will other leaders emerge to challenge him? And how will Canada navigate its relationship with the U.S. with Trump back in the picture?
Those are all questions that are going to shape Canada's future, and we'll be here to break it all down for you as it happens.
In the meantime, keep those questions in mind as we head into the final part of our discussion.
And if you're enjoying our analysis, don't forget to follow, like, and share this episode with your friends. We'll be right back.
All right, we're back to Canada News Summaries. We've talked about a lot today. From Trudeau's leadership being questioned to Trump's return and the possibility of big changes in Canadian politics.
It's been quite the conversation. Lots of twists and turns.
Definitely. So as we wrap things up, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. What does all this tell us about the future of Canada?
You know, I think it really highlights how dynamic democracy is. Political landscapes are always changing, shaped by things happening both inside and outside the country. What we're seeing in Canada right now, this uncertainty, this change, it actually shows that their democracy is healthy.
So you're saying these challenges, even the chance of a leadership change,
Yeah.
we shouldn't see them as negative things?
Not necessarily. It means the system is responding to what the people need and want. It reminds us that no leader is irreplaceable, and that when the time is right, new ideas and new voices can come forward. It's kind of exciting in a way.
Exciting. How so?
Because it opens up possibilities. New leaders can bring fresh perspectives, new policies can be put into place, and the country can head in a new direction. It's a chance for renewal and reinvention.
That's a good way to look at it. It's not just about instability. It's about potential and opportunity. And with all the rapid changes happening globally, this ability to adapt might be crucial for Canada's future.
Exactly. The geopolitical landscape is changing so quickly. With figures like Trump re-emerging and the balance of power shifting globally, Canada has to be flexible and adaptable. They need strong leadership, for sure, but also a willingness to embrace change and seize new opportunities.
Do you think Canada has what it takes to handle these challenges and succeed in this changing world?
I think so. Canada has a long history of resilience and adaptability. It's a country that has constantly reinvented itself from its early days as a colony to becoming the modern multicultural nation it is today.
And we can't forget the strength and diversity of its people. That's always been one of Canada's greatest assets.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The Canadian people, with their creativity, their compassion, and their openness to the world, they're the heart and soul of the nation. They're the ones who will ultimately shape Canada's future.
That's a great point. So as we leave our listeners with some final thoughts to consider, what would you say is the most important thing we've talked about today?
I'd say this. Don't be afraid of change. Embrace the uncertainty, get involved in the political process, and be a part of shaping Canada's future. Your voice matters, your actions make a difference, and your vision can help guide the country forward.
That's a powerful message to end on.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration of the Canadian political landscape. We hope you found it informative and engaging.
It's been a pleasure.
And remember, this is just the beginning of the story. Stay tuned as things develop, and we'll be back soon to break it all down for you. Don't forget to follow, like, and share this episode with your friends. Until next time, stay curious and stay engaged. Thanks for listening.